Welcome everyone to our Wednesday, I'm sorry, not August 21st, September 19th
18th.
Planning Commission meeting. Can we have a roll call, please? The wrong agenda, wrong minute.
For September 18th, I am present.
Present.
Here.
Here. We have a report regarding posting of the agenda, please.
The agenda for this meeting was posted on Wednesday, September 11th, on the bulletin board outside City Hall and on the city's website.
Great. If everyone can please stand and repeat after me the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Approval of the minutes. Do you have any comments? Motion?
I move approval of the minutes as
Second.
presented.
We got a second?
Yes.
By Mr. Astorian? Great. We don't need roll call for that. Oral communications, we don't have any cards. So we can go on to Planning Commission orientation. We have a presentation on review and Planning Commission responsibilities, the Brown Act and Planning Commission rules. And it is recommended that the Planning Commission adopt a new resolution to update their rules.
Yeah, actually, we don't have a presentation today because we had it at the previous meeting, but
Right.
we do have updated rules. The only change on the update is we have a new date on it. Last time we had the presentation, but you didn't actually adopt them. So tonight we're asking that you adopt Planning Commission rules.
So
Okay.
moved.
Second.
Great. And do we need to do a roll call on that?
Yes.
Okay. So roll call, please.
Planning Commissioners Astorian.
Yes.
Landrigan.
Aye.
Lee.
Aye.
Manukian.
Aye.
Chairperson Yesai.
Aye. Thank you. All right. Item number 8, Planning Commission items. New business, item A, update of the city's housing element 2014 to 2021. We have a staff report.
Yes, this is a required element of the general plan. According to the state, we need to update it approximately every 5 years, although right now they're on an 8-year cycle. And so we're proposing that we update it. It would be from 2014 to 2021. And essentially, our update is quite minor. We're considering it minor and technical. The only things essentially that we're changing are population. Our population numbers in the 2010 census went down. So we do reflect changes in our demographics. It's actually a reduction. We're also reflecting changes that have occurred in funding as a result of the loss of redevelopment agency monies that we use toward housing, as well as some reductions in federal monies. So what is the housing element? Again, it's part of the general plan. It includes our existing and projected housing needs for all segments of the community. It also includes our goals in order to meet those needs. It's important, not only is it required by the state, but we need it because it allows us to obtain funding for housing programs, for transportation programs, other discretionary projects, such as we received grants for the library. One of the qualifiers for that grant was having a certified housing element. It's also important that we have a housing element because it gives us consistency with regional plans. We have the Regional Transportation Plan and the Sustainable Community Strategy that comes from SCAG, our Southern California Association of Governments. We want to be consistent with that in order to retain some local funding. And we also have the regional housing needs. Those also are identified by SCAG, and those are really the target numbers that we need to show that we have zoning for under the housing element. And the regional housing needs assessment is put together by SCAG. Every time that we have a housing element update, the state directs the local MPOs, in our case SCAG, to prepare those documents and prepare those numbers. And essentially the numbers are based on population, existing housing units, and kind of the characteristics of where they feel that the region is going. It identifies new housing construction need for the city. So it not only does it take into account units we already have, but then replacement housing. Housing as the need is identified by income categories, and for us, we need to show that we have zoning that's capable of providing for that need. And one of the things we passed out today is an attachment. It shows maps and it shows locations. What that is it shows where our available sites are and how they're zoned. That's how we can demonstrate that we can meet our housing need, our available sites. Available sites under state law are based on residential zoning. So you're familiar with Glendale, how we've built lots of units, but most of the units that we've built over the last 5 or 6 years have been in the downtown core. That is consistent with our general plan, because our general plan absolutely puts our density in downtown. We had downzoning a number of years ago where we had basically took a lot of the residential areas, downzoned them, and we upzoned downtown. So you'll see a lot of the towers, residential towers that are being built downtown and also down on the San Fernando corridor. And we'll go over some of the projects that we've built in the last 5 years during this presentation. So our key accomplishments, and this is from our last element, this would be 2006 to 2014. We built 2,500 new dwelling units. We adopted priority service for affordable units for Glendale Water and Power. That's a requirement by the state. It was also a program that was in our last housing element, so we're in compliance with that. We did an analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. You guys did receive a presentation on that about a year or so ago, and that has been adopted. We have done a reasonable accommodation ordinance. Again, that was a requirement of the state. It was in the previous housing element as a program. We've adopted that. We just recently did our housing definitions. Again, that was a requirement under the previous housing element. And then we have also been very successful in encouraging public-private affordable housing development. We'll go over some of the housing authority projects. These are affordable projects that have been built with the city and using a variety of public funds as well as private funds. We have Doran Gardens. This is a 57-unit affordable housing project with a public park. Geneva Homes. We have Gardens on Garfield. And again, you'll notice that we have all types of housing. We also have special needs housing. This is Casa de la Amistad. This is 24 units of special needs housing for cerebral palsy, developmentally disabled. We also have a Veterans Village project, which is planned. So for our recent update that we're doing or proposing now, our RENA number before our last element was 3,100 units. It's been dropped by over 1,000 units. We're now at a 2,017 unit requirement for our regional housing needs. Therefore, the existing zoning that I passed out, where it shows the available sites, our available sites will still meet this housing need. We have had very few homes built in our residential areas. As I said, most of the building that occurred over the last 6 to 8 years has occurred in our essentially multifamily zones or in our downtown specific plan area or in our mixed use zones. So our available sites is still available, and it was now, if before we could demonstrate that we can meet the needs for well over 3,000 units in our residential zoning, we can meet the need for 2,000 units. It's gone down. And most of those sites remain available. The regional housing need is also broken into different housing categories. We have extremely low income and very low income. The way you figure that is you take the very low income, that's people who are 50% of county median income, and you divide that number in half. One half of those are assumed to be extremely low income. Then we have a low income population, 50 to 80% of county median. Moderate income is 80 to 100% of county median income. And then we have above moderate units, 120% or greater of county median income.
What's the median income?
60,000.
I don't recall exactly what it is,
50-something.
and it varies based on their household size, the way they calculate it. It is in the document, I just don't recall exactly what page.
50, so I was kind of surprised. It was low.
And it is updated every year by the county.
I'll do two different ones.
In terms of our loss of housing resources, we think this is pretty significant in terms of why our housing programs are going to be changing in the future. We have Section 8, that's the monies that are used to assist people with the rental units. That Section 8 funds, those are federal funds. Those have been reduced. We've also had a reduction, obviously, in redevelopment money. We had quite a bit of money that was set aside and I've just replaced quite a bit of money that was set aside in redevelopment housing money. We had $7.6 million there. We were able to program some of it in order to keep it. We programmed $2.4 million. The rest of the money went back to the state, so we essentially lost it. That's where you can kind of see a difference, where you have oops, let me go back. Right in here, you can see it. Look, this was the money that we had before. This was money that was redevelopment set aside. We programmed as much of it as we could here, and the remainder we lost. And then we've also had reductions in just the federal home funds, emergency shelter funds, supportive housing program, and homeless prevention and rehousing. So the total changes between fiscal year 2010-11 and 2013, we lost $8.7 million worth of funding for affordable housing and other resources. In terms of program strategies, these are the existing program strategies we have in the current element, and we are also proposing no changes. We'll have these, and we're proposing to keep these in the upcoming one. So we have preservation and enhancement of existing housing stock, production of affordable housing, rental assistance, increased home ownership opportunities, housing services, fair housing, and then one we've actually added last time was sustainability. So we have a variety of programs. They're all outlined in the document, but I wanted to highlight a couple of them. We've had code enforcement. The only change we've had in code enforcement is they've essentially been moved into a different department. They're now under community development rather than, well, actually they were in community development. I guess planning joined them, or the way you look at it. But we've now had a reorganization in that department. Neighborhood target areas. Before we were looking at Adams Hill. We're now looking at the Tropico neighborhood. And probably heard we have a grant that's been in the paper. They've been studying Tropico. That will become our target area, and we'll be focusing on that area for rezoning and also as part of the South Glendale Community Plan. We don't know what the zoning will. We don't know that we'll actually change any of the zoning. It's more likely we may be changing some of the characteristics. So in having perhaps green streets identified for that area, maybe some more street improvements down there. But again, that's still under study. We're also looking at having a density bonus program. It has been successful for us. We're not looking at making any changes to it, but we want to continue that. We have Section 8 rental housing choice, small lot subdivision. We've already started looking into that. Council has initiated it. That is on our work program. We have care management services. Again, those are existing programs. Homeless services are existing programs. Fair housing plan, that's a requirement for receiving community development block grant funds. We will be continuing with that. South Glendale Community Plan, we're continuing with that one. Transit-oriented development housing standards, we're hoping to get information from the Tropico study to inform that work effort. And then we're also hoping we'll be able to do a Greener Glendale climate adaptation plan. You're familiar with the first two phases that we did. We did a plan for municipal operations for Greener Glendale, and we also did one for community operations or activities. And this, if we're able to find funding, then we would like to complete it with an adaptation plan. We did an environmental review for actually the negative declaration and initial study. I emailed that to you, so you should have had a chance to take a look at it. We did that for the last element. Since these changes that we're making are essentially technical minor changes, reflecting changes that have just occurred in demographics, or actually a reduction in what would be an environmental impact, we've prepared an addendum to the negative declaration. You do have a copy of that on the dais for you to take a look at. Next steps, we have ongoing public review. Right now it's out for public review. It's posted on the city's website. And we also have a copy that was sent to HCD, so they are looking at it to give us comments back. We're under a deadline right now. There's a requirement. There didn't used to be a requirement under state law. If you were late turning in a housing element, there didn't used to be any sanctions. Well, now they've decided to change that. If we don't have an adopted element up in October, they can require us to update the housing element every 4 years. Rather, if we get it up there in time before the end of October, then we don't have to update it every 4. We can update it every 8 years. So there is an incentive for us to actually submit the document on time. That's why we're asking you to take a look at it today. So while it's under review at the state, we're asking you to make recommendations based on the document you have before us. We do anticipate that there may be revisions. We think we've completed everything required by the state. We think we're in good shape. We have a certified element. We think it'll be certified again. But we don't know what the state ultimately is going to give us for comments. And so if we do have comments on changes that we need to make from HCD, we'll be bringing the element back to you just to address whatever their concerns are. So we are recommending today that you recommend that the City Council adopt this housing element and also take a look at the addendum and recognize that that has been prepared in accordance with CEQA. And that concludes staff's presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Shirley?
I don't know if I missed it in the report, but do we have inventory of affordable housing available in Glendale, senior housing, and also the data of how many people, if there are any, on the waiting list, and how many years of that waiting list, or we don't have anybody on the waiting list, and so on.
I know there are a number of people on the waiting list. I do not know what the
No,
I'll
his light
repeat
is on.
We have our lights on.
I do not know what they might want the light on because of this. Thanks.
Our viewers are going to fall asleep.
I don't know the actual numbers, but I do know the city does maintain lists for various housing programs. I know they are long, and their demand greatly exceeds our availability to supply the housing. Within the housing element itself, in Chapter 4, we identify the different affordable housing units we have built that we do have under contract, and you can see them. They're by various types. We've included photos of them, too. So they're broken into areas. Correct me if I miss one, but we have senior housing in there. We have special needs housing, and we have just a regular affordable housing available to any type of family, and we have it broken down into affordability units, so the number of units in the whole project and the number of those that are affordable, and then we also have the funding sources that were used to construct those units. So I hope that answered your question.
So, but you do not have, actually you do not maintain, you have the list of the people who are on the waiting list, but compared to what is available, you cannot forecast, or to I guess to fulfill the need, or to take care of the need, to reduce the number of people on the waiting list. Any plans to mediate that?
I'm not aware of any, and right now, I'm just not aware of it. I do know that we just don't have the resources to meet the need. But I do know that when the housing authority does take a look at new projects and make recommendations, that is one of the things they do look at. They look at what needs do we have in the community, and they also look at the funding sources and the locations of where housing could go. So I know it's reviewed, but in terms of actually having a specific list for senior housing, I'm not aware of one. And again, our lists are the properties that we have in the city that we have an investment. There may be other properties out there where we don't have a contract. They would not be listed in the housing element.
I don't know if this will be, part of the housing element, but to get the incentive for builders to build or include low-income affordable housing, I think is 20% is what is
For like density bonus?
Yeah, for density bonus.
Well, it depends on the amount of affordability that they're providing. You can go up to 35% density bonus, although Glendale has gone well beyond that, depending on certain projects.
Okay.
So it just depends. We provide density bonus based on lot width, as well as the 35% density bonus up to 35% density bonus that the state provides. So our density in Glendale, we have been successful in getting density bonus projects to be constructed without public funds, just because we basically provide an opportunity for double density, depending on where the project is located and the affordability level.
Now, if the project is all, affordable / senior housing, is there a greater incentive for that type of project?
I don't know if I would say greater incentive. There is incentives, I would say, but I don't know that it would be a greater incentive than for any other type of affordable project. A lot of it depends on income level. So the more, I didn't bring the code with me, but the more affordability provided, the more numbers of units you provide. For instance, very low income. If you provide 5% very low income affordable, you only need 5% to get the density bonus, versus if you provide, I believe, senior housing, I believe it's 50%. And I can go double check and bring back the code. If you'd like me to bring that back next week, I can certainly bring back the senior housing requirement.
The reason I was asking all this is that maybe, if we increase some of these incentives in our program, that you'll have more development of senior housing, affordable housing, if we have a waiting list, that we cannot, help to reduce, maybe by increasing or offering more incentives that we could have developers develop this affordable housing. Because affordable housing for developers is not really lucrative business, so they don't really want to do this because they work with the tax credits and the bond. But if there are incentives with the density bonuses and other bonuses from the city, I think we can attract more developers in this area.
We can certainly make that a suggestion to council if you wanted to forward that as a comment, that they ought to look into encouraging a density bonus for senior housing.
Sure.
Well, I think, if I'm not wrong, Commissioner Chang's, Commissioner Lee's suggestion was not only about senior housing, it was inclusive of all affordable housing, whether it's low income, moderate, and so forth.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions with the
Other
programs? The one thing that we noticed that we did not put in the element, because we actually forgot about it, but one of the things that we've had, when people come in for affordable housing projects and they have a density bonus, one of the things that's required is that they have to go to a hearing and ask for incentives and concessions. I'm not aware of any we have not granted. So when people come in and ask for them for affordable housing, we want to see a project happen. So we will work with them in order to see it occur. But one of the concerns we had is we don't want to see projects where they'll come in and build, for instance, 2 or 3 bedroom units for everybody else except for the affordable, and then that becomes a 1-bedroom unit. So we've been, or worse, we just read in the paper, apparently there was a project, I believe it was in New York or Washington, where they actually designed a housing project. There was an affordable component. They actually made a separate entrance for the people who are on the affordable housing. So that really concerned us, and we said, we want to make sure that if somebody is coming in building a density bonus project, that the units that are proposed to be affordable are integrated with the rest of the project and are commensurate with the other units. So we would suggest that you might want to consider adding to the policy for density bonus that we require units to be integrated into the whole project, and that the affordability level for the affordable units just be at the mean of whatever the units are that they're proposing. So if they're proposing 2-bedroom units, then fine, 2-bedroom units should be affordable. If they're proposing 3-bedroom units, then 3-bedroom. If it's all 1-bedroom, like for instance, like the Elevate, then 1-bedroom would be fine. But we just want to make sure that we're not creating a density bonus that has a lesser type of a unit that might have a stigma. We want them to be integrated.
Well, Ms. Stutler, SB 1818, state law prohibits segregation of the affordable units from the main, the batch of it. So I mean that's written in state law. Whether or not we add it or not, that takes precedent, if I'm not wrong. So I don't think there would be a problem with that.
Well, we have been implementing it that way, and when people, I can assure you, as a hearing officer who has put on requirements that require them to be integrated, and I will specify which unit needs to be the affordable unit. Every single time it's been challenged, and they've had questions for it. It would actually be very helpful to have a clear policy somewhere that we could point to in our housing element to say, no, this is definitely our policy. You need to integrate it. You need to integrate the affordable housing with everything else, not only in the design, but also in the size and location and number of bedrooms in the unit. So I would put that out there. You may want to consider adding that.
But I'd love to see what the proposal is before we add it on. But kudos to you. I mean, I'm all for it. But would like to see. I mean, I'd like to see how do you define which unit where and how, and whether or not it's to take the entire design of the project and what it represents and then mimic that in the affordability section of it, or how I'd like to see the regimen that you're going to use, and I'm all for it.
Yeah, I would like to see you come up with some language so that we could not do it ourselves. I think if
Yeah.
you could come up with that policy, I think I would certainly be in favor of it.
And conceptually, how do you see that happening, Stotler?
I see it being added as a policy. I would take a look at, I believe we have affordable housing under, it's in
2 or 3?
2. Yeah, 2 would be our housing policies, and I believe it's goal 4 talks about, is where we have our affordable housing ID'd.
I'm sorry, what?
204.
204. If you want to take a short break, I can write up some language and we can have it really quickly and you can take a look and see if it makes sense.
2, it's on page 5 of 34.
Chapter 2.
Is that goal 3 or goal 4?
Well,
Goal 4 is where we actually talk about affordable housing. We actually talk about the density bonus. Policy 2.4 says promote the development of extremely low, very low, low and moderate income housing by allowing developers density bonuses or other financial incentives for providing units for low and moderate income residents. And I would recommend considering adding another sentence to that that just says, affordable units shall be integrated into the housing project, and that the affordable units should reflect would be actually the average mean of the development. So if you have, say you have, 5 3-bedroom units and 5 2-bedroom units, and you're getting 2 affordable housing units, then 1 unit should be a 3-bedroom and 1 unit should be a 2-bedroom, because you're reflecting the middle of what's actually being proposed. Versus where we've had people coming in proposing 2 or 3 3-bedroom units, 2 2-bedroom units, and 2 1-bedroom units, and the 2 1-bedroom units would be the affordable. So it seems I look at it as a matter of
It doesn't meet a variety
equity.
of housing needs. It only meets,
I think they're talking about the inclusionary unit.
right, exactly.
As opposed to just,
I'm talking about when they come in for an affordable housing project, you have a variety. Most projects don't come in with all one type of unit. Most of them have a variety. And so we just want to make sure that the affordable units aren't always the smallest one, aren't always the one by, in the corner by the trash can. We want to make sure that we're actually
So
providing
it's dispersed throughout.
first throughout and
development.
equitable.
Right.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal that we're looking
Right.
for.
Okay.
And so perhaps it is in the state law with density bonus, but when people come before us and they want to have an affordable housing project,
They put it in.
and we tell them to put that in there because, frankly, it's the right thing to do, to not have units that really reflect make the affordable units reflect the character of the development. If it's don't have suddenly one smaller unit. We don't want to have a stigma attached to a unit. We want it to blend in. Our ultimate goal as affordability projects is that you can't tell which unit is affordable versus any other unit in the structure. And so that's what we're trying to get at, is to make sure we have a policy that really supports that idea. Because I think we all believe in it. It's just not in the document. And so that's where I would say we want to make sure to make it clear. So then in the future, when other hearing officers hear cases, it will be clear where the direction of the city is.
Okay.
So do you want to call a recess so she
Yeah.
can write?
Do you want to just go ahead?
I have only one concern about what you're saying. On the one hand, you say policy, and I agree with that. The problem with that is there's an inherent subjectivity to what you're saying. And I have to echo Commissioner Astorian's statement. I'm all with you on this. But it does occur to me that there's a bit of subjectivity in there. Not that there's anything wrong with that. But if that is the reality of the situation, whatever language that you draft, may I suggest, include that subjectivity in the following context. Any bonus add-on must meet the approval of the fill-in-the-blanks, whether it's the commission, whether it's the hearing officer, whatever. Basically, we're not going to give you chapter and verse so that you can hire a lawyer to go around it. You're going to come to us, we're going to look at it, and if we don't like it, you're going to go back and redo it.
We could put it in that they meet an approval of the housing plan, because housing plans are reviewed.
All right?
So that would be a fair document that
Sure.
everybody, once we prepare one, it goes through staff review. It's disclosed when people come in to actually come in for a unit that has any type of public assistance.
Right.
So that might be a fair document to put it in.
Sure. As long as we understand the reality that there's no hard and fast rule that we can apply to this matter, and as long as the applicant is put on notice that, listen, whatever you do, we have to like it. Now, you're going to have a problem with your city attorney saying, well, maybe that's too, what's the word I'm looking for, arbitrary. But that's where we are, so let the lawyers handle it later.
Yeah, because, Ms. Stadler, harking back on what Commissioner Manukian was just saying, see, when you threw the sentence that it needs to reflect the mean average of a project, that becomes very dicey, very, very dangerous. And so, for example, if somebody doesn't reflect that and wants to do lower units or all one-bedrooms and all affordable, you're going to say no to them?
Well, no, we want to
So
reflect
there is-
whatever's going on in the building.
I get
So-
it, but I get all of that. But there's a lot of discretionary stuff going on in here, and I think if we defer it to exactly as Commissioner American suggested, to either the hearing officer at planning or the doc, I'm okay with that. Leave it open, but don't just maim the applicant for wanting or not wanting to do something. Do guide them. I mean, I have no problems with that.
Because stating mean is sort of prescriptive.
Yeah.
And maybe the reality is that that's really not the best for that design. So I think the less prescription you have in it, the little more flexibility, and you allow it to be the discretionary review that it should be, I think I agree with my colleagues here.
Let me just add one more thing. I mean, having been in the business of real estate, commercial real estate, for a long, long time, there is nothing that can substitute a relevant incentive for a developer. And by that, the reason that I use relevant is because you can put an incentive that we consider as laymen as incentive, but it may mean nothing to the developer. So, if you were to revisit those incentives, if you really want to get, I mean, I had this discussion about the solar power issues, but that's not this proceeding or this commission. But if you want to if you really want to get the affordable housing in the city of Glendale in a meaningful way that we can all touch, feel, and sense, revisit your incentives, revisit what you suggest as an incentive to a developer, have a sit down with the developers, sit down and say, well, okay, if I dictate to you what your affordable unit mix is going to be, then what kind of an incentive do you want? Or what is it that will get you to meet our mix of units that we are requesting for you to put in as affordable in our city? So those are my suggestions.
Good.
Would you want to give us a couple of minutes? We can draft
Yeah.
something up and come back?
Yeah.
That quickly, wow.
Yeah. Okay, let's go to recess.
Thank you.
Yeah, because we need to get this today, so I think it's a good policy that we can come up with something quickly.
Sure. Are we?
Last one, too. Okay, I think we're back on.
Oh, fun.
Okay. All right, we're back from our recess. Ms. Stotler, can you please explain?
Okay,
you did.
we made a modification to policy 2.4, Right now it reads, promote the development of extremely low, very low, low and moderate income housing by allowing developers density bonuses or other financial incentives for providing units for low and moderate income residents. The unit mix and location of affordable housing units and density bonus projects must be approved by the city and included in an affordable housing plan. So we figure that's giving us some direction that we know for affordable units we do prepare affordable housing plans. It just gives them a heads up that that is something that is approved by the city. That way we're getting review. It's general. We're not locking anybody in a corner. But we are putting them on notice that the decision for which units are affordable is something that the city reserves.
Okay. Anyone have any concerns, comments? No? Okay. Any other questions?
Of staff, not of the motion.
I do have on this map down below by the train station. I think it's by Cerritos Avenue.
Yes.
I think down past San Fernando, if you go Cerritos west on Cerritos and you go past San Fernando, that whole area, I believe it's an SR zone. Is that correct? Where a lot of that area is very underdeveloped. It's single-family homes, single stories, but
Yeah,
you could build up to 5-6 stories, I believe, in that
Yeah,
area.
it might be San Fernando Road mixed use.
Yeah, and it's all residential permittable. So I'm wondering why that's not here. That's not shown here on the map.
Well, this is only showing R3050, R2250, R1650, and R1250. This is only showing our standard residential zones because it's the standard residential zones that we're using to actually show that we can meet our regional housing need. We know we have capacity well beyond that when you take a look at our mixed-use zones and our commercial zones because we do allow residential and commercial. But in order to satisfy the state law,
You just have to show in the residential.
we're just showing it in residential. We sort of are if you think about it, we're keeping our mixed-use zones and our commercial kind of in the back pocket because if the state law changes, then we can just demonstrate that we have an additional capacity.
Okay. So the 2,000 units that you're required to have the 2,000 units by 2024. Is that correct?
No, we're required to show that we have
the
zoning
ability.
available, that
Okay.
if somebody wanted to build them, they
Right.
could.
And is that in addition to all the developments that will be completed in the next 2 years?
Well, I wouldn't say it's in addition to. What we're showing is zoning capacity.
Just ability.
It's just ability. It's not actually that we're building those units or
I
those
got it.
projects.
And that's not
online.
even a lot of those projects in downtown aren't even included in the availability
Exactly,
here.
because the ones in downtown are in the DSP. They're not in one of the typical residential zones.
Okay, I got it. And then there's a lot of talk about inclusionary zoning, and can you explain exactly what it is?
Right now, we have an inclusionary requirements for projects that are ownership projects in the San Fernando Road redevelopment area. So that area still exists, and there still is an inclusionary requirement when somebody builds an affordable housing project there. We're not proposing to make any changes to that. My understanding is that there was a lawsuit on inclusionary housing, and so things were sort of in limbo. They were on hiatus for those kind of projects, and we weren't seeing affordable units. We weren't seeing inclusionary housing being built or required until that lawsuit was resolved.
So inclusionary
So-
housing just means it's a mix of, it includes a mix of housing types or affordability?
Yeah, what inclusionary
Absolutely.
housing means is that when you build units in a certain area, in this case, for sale units in the San Fernando Road redevelopment area, there's a certain percentage that you need to include for affordable housing. And we allow people you either build the affordable units as part of your projects, or we actually have a fund where people can pay into an inclusionary housing fund, and those units can be built as affordable units elsewhere in the area.
So that's only right now. That's only happening along the San Fernando
That's
corridor.
right, and only for
Right.
for sale units.
Right.
Not for
Where
rentals.
where you actually have a requirement, how much
For
affordable.
inclusionary housing, that's correct.
Got it. Okay. Any other questions, comments? No? Okay. Not, if we can have a motion, or let me close the,
Well, no, actually, I do have some questions.
go ahead.
On page 3 of 10, that's in section 1.
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1. There was, in item number 4 from top, this is a community needs assessment survey was mailed out randomly to about 6,000 Glendale residents in 91204 and 91205 zip codes. Why were these zip codes chosen, and was it density? Why, for example, wasn't 91203 in there, or something to that effect?
208 or...
Yeah, that's part of the consolidated plan. We piggyback our housing efforts onto Community Development Block Grant, and when they put together their consolidated plan, we go to their meetings and we use their data to inform our process. So that would have been a requirement for CDBG. That would be low income. Those would be lower income census tract areas that were mailed out for their requirement. So we could ask them and find out what exactly their notification requirements are, but I believe that that's why they target those areas. And that would be why those zip codes are targeted.
Because of the fact that there are low-income zip codes in comparison to, say, 91207.
Right, and the lower income zip codes are where you can expend the CDBG monies, and so that's why they would have been targeted for the mailing.
Doesn't go by census tract, it goes by zip codes, Ms. Toddler?
Yeah, I don't know the specifics of how they target it. But if they're saying that we use their data, so if they said that that's where they use the census, if they said they actually use the zip codes for a phone survey or for mailings, then I would assume that that's what they did, and it would cover those areas.
I think it's interesting that cruise night was used as distributing and collecting community needs assessment surveys. Seems like a very interesting event to do that during.
Well, I can tell you we do, a lot of times when the city has events, different events, we're there promoting and distributing information about our projects, especially now that we're very limited in funding. We don't have the ability to do mass mailings or mass phone calls or do these kinds of surveys. So if you have one area in the city, especially if they have a grant to do it, we tend to double up. So when CDBG has community meetings, we show up at their meetings. For instance, last year for the housing element, we showed up there to talk about not only the housing element, we talked about the South Glendale Community Plan. So we talk about all our projects when we see an opportunity. And the same thing's true. When we hold a meeting, they come to our meetings as well, and we publicize their programs. So I can tell you in the past we've gone to Snow Day at the park, and we've been at Glendale, Cesar Chavez, we've been at Glendale Healthy Kids events, promoting the housing element as well as our South Glendale Community Plan. And that's why. So this is just another example of us. As long as we have people there, we're going to promote all the city programs that we're aware of at the time and get their input.
On Chapter 1, page 7, 1.5, Summary of Major Accomplishments. The first bullet point gives numbers in different dwelling types. And basically, when you add them up and divide it by the 2,171 that we're talking about, that comes to about 48%.
Yeah,
That's quite a successful ratio, if that is true, if I'm doing the math correctly. In other words, out of all of these units that have been built, some sort of an affordable, units confirming with some sort of an index of affordability have been built, and it shows about 48% of what was built included affordable.
Yeah,
Is that correct? Because this is
Yeah,
how
that
I'm
would be-
reading this. That
would be
statistic.
correct, because we saw a tremendous slowdown in construction. Obviously, with the recession, the slowdown hit everybody, but the units that were least affected were those that already had funding, and those tended to be affordable housing units where the city was already programmed money. So
That's why it's-
we did the reason. I mean, a lot of cities take a look at our draft element, and they were actually surprised at the number of units that were constructed in Glendale.
Yep.
And
That's
I mean,
where
it
the
is
funding-
surprising. We've probably built more units than almost everybody, than any other jurisdiction in our area, except for maybe LA and Long Beach. And that's because we had a lot of redevelopment money set aside. We had a lot of projects programmed. We were successful getting grants. And so we were able to construct. Whereas a lot of the private projects, they didn't go through. Even though we might have had approvals for funding reasons, a lot of them, you can see from the previous element, we had units that had already been entitled, but they wound up not being constructed because of the recession. So the reason why there are so many affordable housing units is because they had public money, and at that time we had public money. But now that redevelopment has gone away and that source of funding is gone, we may not be as successful in building those types of units in the future if we're not able to locate another source of affordable housing funding.
Great. I mean, that's quite an accomplishment, I can tell you that. 48% of all units that were built to be affordable in that period of time, it's quite an accomplishment. I mean, I don't know if there is any other municipality that can either match or come close to that number. I'm not talking about the behemoth that is the south of us, LA, but any other cities to our size. That's a huge number. Huge number. 48% have had some sort of an affordability, would have been connected to some sort of an affordability index, whether it's very low, moderate, or what have you. That is huge. Congratulations.
I do have one question. Throughout the goals, each goal has, of course, an action verb: to implement, to expand the policy. And my question is what is the timetable to make the goals policy? Because some of these are and some of them aren't. So, for instance, Goal 6, Chapter 1, Introduction, page 1010, a city with housing that is livable and sustainable. Expand the policy to conserve existing and future affordable units. See Program 1F. Such as, so do we have that policy in place, or is that a future action on our part? The last one, transit-oriented development housing standards, to incorporate transit-oriented development housing standards in the zoning code. So these are planned policy updates?
What these are they call them program strategies. We have programs that we're going to, that's the state term. We have programs that we've identified that becomes a basis of our work plans. And there's a series of them. I sort of went through a handful of them
Right.
in the slides. But those become our work programs. Those are things that staff has to accomplish. And we'll have, this is an 8-year plan, so we have 8 years in which we want to meet those goals. So, for instance, conserving existing and future affordable housing units, we have ongoing policies for that. We have different programs that the city uses. We know that there's a lot of at-risk units. As we build affordable housing units are affordable for a certain amount of time. And then when the time frame comes up, we may lose the affordability. They may become market rate. So then when we're aware that there might be a loss of an affordable project, well, then the city contacts the owner and sees what we can do to keep the affordability, whether it's
Section 8 or...
Section 8 or whatever the tool might be. So, I mean, we are actively trying to keep our affordable housing stock. I mean, we're fortunate that we have it, but again, you have to conserve it.
Right.
And we're always seeking to add to it. So if a new project comes through, you just saw a number of projects, they do come through periodically. You'll see them at council, where when you have a large new development coming through that has any sort of public funding for affordable units, well, every time we build one of those, there's more units that are added to the stock. But again, how long they're affordable depends on the funding source. Sometimes it's 55 years, sometimes it's 25 years. It just depends on what the source of the funding is.
Well, as a follow-up to that, if we are not able to conserve the existing stock, where do we keep that tally? Do we have it in here, where how much affordable housing we've lost with how much we've added? Are we going forward, or are we at a standstill? Are we going backwards?
Well, at this point, we have lost some units have been lost. They are identified. I believe it's Chapter 4 where we go through units at risk, and there's a
Right.
discussion of them. So I know we have lost some buildings. However, we've added more buildings than we've lost. So in terms of our overall stock, we haven't gone backwards. But there definitely has been a shift. And then we've also, I know they've, I don't know if it was completed, but I do know there have been discussions for purchasing affordable housing, giving more loans so we can extend the affordability out. Sometimes things like rehab, so there'll be money given to rehab. They can rehabilitate the units and to keep them affordable longer. So there have been programs like that.
But that's for 5 years or 6 years type of.
They may be limited.
But see, I think that's an important thing. I'm glad we have it in here, but I think that's, the most, I think, relevant policy is to maintain our stock and to keep growing it instead of keeping it at, a median so that you have some coming and some going. It's how do you make sure that we are anticipating the need and meeting the need? Isn't that what the intention of this is?
Right?
I agree. And this is where the discussion about the incentivizing comes in and becomes even stronger.
Right.
As if there is an incentive for a period of time, whether it's 25 years, 55 years is good and long enough time for me not to be concerned about losing affordability or affordable housing. But if it's 25 or below, you gotta have some sort of an incentive that this developer, this owner, is gonna sit down and say, you know what, it's worth it for me to keep this affordable housing stock in my project. This is why I would really like to have a discussion about, we're looking at both sides of the equation. We know what the outcome is, but let's see what it is that fuels that outcome. And I don't believe there is anything else stronger than incentivizing it to fuel that outcome or to produce that outcome.
Totally agree.
Now, I do have a question about green streets. Can you give us a little bit, a
description of what that
a
is?
see-through of what that is? Because I'm hearing it a lot, and I'd like to know a little bit more about it.
Yeah, there's been a change in state law. Actually, a couple of years ago, we had to make amendments to our land use element and our circulation element to talk about complete streets, and that's the idea that your streets include your streets aren't only for cars. You have to provide for pedestrians. You have to provide for bicyclists. You also have to provide for, in certain opportunities, parkways, greenways. It can actually be recreational opportunity. It can be an outdoor open space opportunity as well as just a regular a street for cars. Green streets take that a step further and say, okay, how can we really make this green? How can we really make these streets an amenity, a recreational amenity, an open space amenity? So we're looking at things of perhaps widening sidewalks so more people are out there, providing more buffers, so perhaps you allow parking along the street so it's a little safer to walk along. You don't have the alternate cross section where you have the sidewalk right adjacent to driving traffic. You look at putting in perhaps things like parklets. We have one that's going in on Brand Boulevard. You put in mini parks, you put in stops. So when you plan your street, you plan it as not only for cars, but as an open space amenity. So you might have areas where you stop. You might have a plaza. You may have a destination for some of this. It may not be every street, but you may put it on the ones that perhaps lead to like Brand Park or ones that lead to Griffith Park. So the idea is it's more than just a street tree plan. It's more than just a bikeway plan. It's how do we really make this an open space, active use type of a plan for our streets. And it's because so much of our land use area is devoted to streets. And it goes hand in hand with ideas of doing traffic calming, perhaps
Right.
reducing the amount of pavement because you can use this area for things more than just making cars go fast. So it really is
It
a
deals with
movement.
intersections, too. It deals
Deals with
seriously
intersections.
areas that are high danger zones for pedestrian and bicycles that interact with cars. And so intersections such as we've seen brought to us recently, the path of travel is reduced so that it is a more comfortable walk and not a race across from one side to the other. And there are islands of refuge and other elements. So it's a whole different way of looking at planning a street in concert with traffic engineers, planners, the community development, and making it a holistic design.
So tell me, Ms. Stutler, if has there been any discussions about candidates for Green Street in the city of Glendale? And if yes, which streets come to your mind?
I really think that's a topic that they were looking at as part of the transportation master plan, and I know they are absolutely researching this right now as part of the Tropico Station study. That is absolutely one of the things that the city is looking at. So in terms of which street comes to mind, I would say something down in Tropico. I don't know the results of what that study is going to be, but I know we're absolutely looking at it.
So
So we want to have a policy to allow for that.
So then we will have a discussion about this holistic approach of transportation.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
what I look at it as in our South Glendale community
Correct.
plan.
Okay, if there's nothing else about this document, are we okay to move forward?
I mean, if you insist.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
No, I'm okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right, can we have a motion to recommend this as amended?
Yeah, we actually have a resolution that we
Resolution.
distributed to everybody. It should be on the dais for you. If somebody just wants to,
Read
you know,
it.
I don't know that you need to read the whole thing, but if somebody wants to make a motion to approve the resolution and have a second,
I move that we approve the resolution that we recommend approval of the updated housing element as presented with the change given to us today and to the city council.
Great.
Second.
Can we have roll call?
Yes.
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Manukian,
Aye.
Chairperson Yasayan.
Aye. Thank you.
Do we have to approve the addendum to the negative declaration, or is that?
No, you don't need to prepare it. You just had to consider it, so that's why we
part of
provided
the
it to you. It's
consideration.
part of
Okay.
the, exactly.
All right.
Okay. Planning department updates.
You saw the, thank you. Okay, thanks. You saw the MS zone and a couple of, several weeks ago, I believe, we brought the MS zone, the medical services zone to you. But that was adopted by the city council. And then we also have the housing definitions that you saw. They were introduced yesterday by council.
Okay, great. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, that's it.
Okay. You don't want to. We have a community meeting coming up, October 3rd. You want to announce that?
No, I'll let you announce that.
Okay. Comments from commissioners? No? No? Okay, well, we have the Community Development Department is doing outreach event on October 3rd for the South Glendale Community Plan and also for the Tropico Station. And this is a movie event and movie and food truck event. They want to get public outreach with the residents down there. The movie, I forgot the name, but it's about 1940s.
Double Indemnity?
1940s movie about a car chase movie that happens in Glendale. So it's just the way I think they want to make something exciting to get people down there. And then I believe there's more of a family-oriented public outreach on October 26th. which I think is a Saturday. And they're going to reach out to more of the ethnic population and down in South Glendale. And so those are the two big outreach events on October. And they're really pushing, I guess, for the October 3rd one right now.
Can we get announcements on these events emailed to us, please?
Sure.
I found out about it from Facebook.
You did?
Yeah.
Who are you friends with?
Alan Loomis. So yeah, it would be really nice if we all hear about it, because I just came about it without really knowing about it other than that. Yeah. Anything else?
The only item we are going for next week or in the next meeting, we will be having the permit streamlining come before you. I know Commissioner Yasayan and Commissioner Astorian were part of that committee, so I just wanted to point that out to you because it was quite a large effort. So if you're able to be here, I would encourage you to be here to the meeting. I'm really happy everybody showed up. It's been a while since we've had a full commission.
Gonna have a party.
I wonder why.
Why is that?
We have traveling
Yeah.
commissioners, so
But we made it. Yeah, we haven't missed a meeting. I haven't missed
at least two of them.
Did I miss them? Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, let's adjourn. Or if someone wants to move to adjourn. So moves. Great. Adjourn.